Oh, all right, Shirley. Sorry for the delay there. It's an honor to be included in this conference, although I must confess a bit of a conflict of interest as I am an American convert to Orthodoxy and in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, addressing the topic of contemporary converts in America. But I also am an academic whose work deals with narratives and how to contextualize them. The scarcity of hard evidence on my topic today works in my favor, hopefully, in trying to contextualize the stories of contemporary American converts in the Russian Orthodox Church, albeit briefly. I have found relatively little deep research evidence on this still new topic, although I have found much debate and commentary. Two crucial questions loom over trying to understand this phenomenon. Why would Americans convert to Orthodox Christianity? And specifically, why would they align themselves with the Russian Church abroad in a period of renewed hostility by Western media and elites towards Russia and Russian culture? This relates, I think, to a second larger question at the centenary of ROCOR. What is the purpose of ROCOR now that the Soviet Union has fallen a generation ago? I hope to return to these two questions at the end. First, let me share one point from our small Russian Orthodox mission parish in northern Appalachia, which perhaps does help to provide context for the stories of converts who have become part of ROCOR in America. Almost all our members are converts. They left mainly Protestant churches or atheism because of their search for authentic roots of Christianity and their sense of spiritual need, including dissatisfaction with the directions of modern American forms of non-Orthodox Christianity, which they saw as moving further away from any traditional roots. The small data point I would like to share is that among our convert families, we have at least four, about 1/7 of the official membership, whose baptismal names are from Celtic saints of the pre-schism West: Bridget, Brannock, David, and Kentigern. In addition, the mission requested and received a blessing to be named for St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco, in part because of his bridging of Russian and American world orthodoxy. Several of our members have been significantly influenced by the writings of Father Seraphim Rose in becoming Orthodox. He was a notable American convert and spiritual son of St. John and hieromonk in ROCOR. St. John himself did much to highlight the veneration of early Western saints in the Russian Church. In this connection, another convert ROCOR parish in our diocese recently held an akathist for the Great, recognized as an Orthodox saint king of Anglo-Saxon England. Other convert communities across jurisdictions in North America show special dedication to St. Moses the Black, highlighting African-American Christian heritage, and to Russian Alaskan saints. It seems that Orthodoxy in America generally has an appeal to converts that includes saints seen as bridging ancient Christianity and American culture, including ancestry of Americans of varied backgrounds. Albert Rabbitoe, who wrote a book about his journey to Orthodoxy, was an eminent African-American scholar who saw joyful sorrow as a link between Orthodoxy and historic Black experience of Christian faith. Statistical data about converts to Orthodoxy in North America today comes from Alexei Krindach and his extensive surveys and census of American Orthodox churches. In 2020, he found about 24,000 adherents in ROCOR communities in the US and only about 10,000 regular attendees. This compares to a total of 685,000 adherents in Orthodox churches of all jurisdictions in the US, mainly Greek. Those figures are much smaller than numbers of 1 million that have been cited in the past by members of other jurisdictions for their own memberships alone. Also, this research found that a distinctive characteristic of ROCOR in America is that it has many tiny communities without a full-time salaried priest. Perhaps there is a bit of an undercount due to a lack of support staff, so to speak. Alas, I think our own mission did not return the survey forms. But interestingly, for what I mentioned earlier about the Celtic names in our parish, as a scholar of early Irish Christian culture, I can say that the pattern noted of tiny American ROCOR churches across the countryside was the pattern seen in early Christian Ireland and Western Britain before the schism. These also were coupled with a heavy presence and influence of monastic communities. ROCOR has seen the founding of some new monasteries in recent times, alongside a preeminent influence of Jordanville. Interestingly, although ROCOR shares in a decline of membership with other Orthodox jurisdictions in America, due apparently both to aging congregations and an increasingly secularizing youth culture in America, Alexei Krindach kindly shared with me that a survey in 2020 indicated that the average or mean percentage of converts among ROCOR active members is 70%, the highest among American jurisdictions. Although this was based on a small sampling of only 30 parishes that he indicates must be received with caution, it coincides with another finding of his that showed ROCOR parishes gaining members from other jurisdictions during the past nearly 2 years of the COVID period. That gain was due to a greater range of openness to maintaining services with relatively less restrictions in some ROCOR parishes compared to other jurisdictions. Based on percentages and anecdotal evidence, such transfers would include those of convert background significantly. This picture fits what we have seen in our region in central Pennsylvania at our mission and at 2 long-established ROCOR sister parishes in the Pennsylvania coal country. Our mission, while small, has grown and has acquired 6 acres of land, including a small cemetery, and is actively planning construction of a temple, although our membership is not wealthy. At our last liturgy, we had 45 people present. Our attendance has been moving upwards, with families coming in the last 2 years, both through baptisms and through joining from other jurisdictions. One of our 2 sister parishes has seen a rebirth recently. It has gone from being near closure to renovating its small old temple and often being filled with attendees. The other parish with which our mission is associated recently acquired a new priest who came over to ROCOR from another jurisdiction, himself a convert, due to the developing schism over the Ukraine situation and dissatisfaction with actions of the ecumenical patriarchate in various areas. Key elements of the growth and renewal of the 3 ROCOR parishes in our region involve clergy from backgrounds in other jurisdictions who are converts. One, Hieromonk Claude Vineyard, is 92 years old. He was a priest for many years in the OCA, and at an age when many would be deep into retirement, he decided to return to ROCOR, in which he had been received as a child, because of a feeling of affinity with what he saw as its more traditional approach to faith. He founded our mission 6 years ago. Likewise, our current rector was trained at an OCA seminary and originally part of the OCA, although his family has roots going back to Russian clergy associated with Harbin. Mentored by Father Claude, he came over to ROCOR. Many in our mission are former Lutherans who first came into the OCA but became dissatisfied with what my wife, who is from Russian, characterized as a more American business approach to administration there. This involved some distressing problems locally at the time that Metropolitan Jonah was forced out of office in the OCA and also received into ROCOR. No disrespect is meant toward the dedicated and pious OCA laity and clergy with whom we have worshiped and still love, and who may have different perspectives on that. But such controversy among American jurisdictions leads to a final area of discussing evidence: debate. Debate is more plentiful than research, but also indefinite. Discussion online about converts to Orthodoxy in America includes paper and blogging by writers in many venues, including Public Orthodoxy of the Fordham Orthodox Christian Studies Center, the Allied Orthodox Theological Society of America, and various blogs and social media. Some of this commentary focuses on criticizing the alleged fundamentalism of converts. Sometimes such criticism comically implies a connection between American conversions to the Russian Orthodox Church and politics associated with former President Donald Trump's alleged Russian ties. It suggests connections between allegedly fundamentalist orthodoxy and alleged nationalism of the Russian Church, which is then paradoxically linked to white American nationalism. In some commentaries, I was struck by how supposedly objective intellectuals seem swayed by unfair criticisms of the Russian Church internationally, voiced by supporters of the ecumenical patriarchate. They tend to identify ROCOR with both Tsarist politics and American nationalism, while themselves sometimes advocating for secular American trends such as women clergy and pastoral acceptance of secular sexual anthropology. I will read here the summary of a forthcoming book by the American anthropologist Sarah Riccardi-Swartz entitled Between Heaven and Russia, Religious Conversion and Political Apostasy in Appalachia. This book is to be published soon by Fordham University Press's Orthodox Christianity and Contemporary Thought series, which has links to Fordham's Orthodox Studies Center, which in turn has intellectual and personal alignments with ecumenical patriarchate circles. Dr. Riccardi-Swartz has been a prominent researcher commentator online about American Orthodox converts, in particularly those in ROCOR. She stayed with and studied members of a ROCOR parish near Holy Cross Monastery in West Virginia, which community later objected to her conclusions and methods. While it may be unusual to refer to a forthcoming book's promotion, the storyline it presents seems in line with Dr. Riccardi-Swartz's previous presentations and indicates a pattern of American academic narrative on this topic. It begins, quote, "In one corner of Appalachia, a group of American citizens has embraced the Russian Orthodox Church and through it Putin's new Russia. Historically a minority immigrant faith in the United States, Russian Orthodoxy is attracting Americans who look to Russian religion and politics for answers to Western secularism and the loss of traditional family values in the face of accelerating progressivism. This ethnography highlights an intentional community of converts who are exemplary of much broader networks of Russian Orthodox converts in the US. These converts sought and found a conservatism more authentic than Christian American republicanism and a nationalism unburdened by the broken promises of American exceptionalism. Ultimately, both converts and the church that welcomes them deploy the subversive act of adopting the ideals and faith of a foreign power for a larger transnational political ends," unquote. There is much here that would seem questionable, especially the implication that ROCOR has larger transnational ends of a foreign power in a political sense. Such implications would fundamentally misread both the spiritual dimension of the stories of American converts and ROCOR's own story as an autonomous synod of the Russian Church, having emerged from the worst anti-Christian persecutions in history. To understand Dr. Riccardi-Swartz's position, however, it is necessary to understand the narratives that frame secular American academic approaches today. These involve a paradoxical emphasis on a neutral, secular, objective viewpoint, combined with a sense of the need to prioritize the, quote, lived experience, unquote, of certain perspectives. Those perspectives reflect current secular American concerns with anti-racism, anti-fascism, and anti-patriarchalism, including recent revival of what has been characterized as Russophobia. A few prominent but statistically insignificant cases of far-right American political extremists associating with Orthodoxy helped fuel such views. The danger of such academic framing in its own terms is that it can easily ignore the lived experience of converts in the context of a minority, non-Western Christian tradition in America with its own epistemology and teleology. Thus, research commentators themselves can ironically fall prey to what they might call Eurocentric bias. The book summary concludes, quote, offering insights into this rarely considered religious world, including its far-right political roots that nourish the embrace of Putin's Russia. This ethnography shows how religious conversion is tied to larger issues of social politics, allegiance, anti-democracy, and citizenship. This book provides insight in the growing constellations of far-right conservatism. Russian Orthodox converts are an important gauge for understanding the powerful philosophical shifts occurring in the current political climate in the United States and what they might mean for the future of American values, ideals, and democracy, end quote. The narrative is framed by an American focus, but I must add that I have had the pleasure to meet Dr. Riccardi Swartz in real life. She is personable and thoughtful in conversation, an Orthodox convert too. I look forward to reading the book, which undoubtedly will present more details and hopefully nuance than the political framing of its promotion. But negative analysis of converts in Russian Orthodox churches in America reflects not only secular academic views, but also contexts of a particular intellectual culture within world orthodoxy aligned with the outlook of the ecumenical patriarchate. Beyond this, we can also recognize a deeper potential cultural bias inherent in what the philosopher Charles Taylor calls the secular age of modernity, in an individualistic, distant view of self, exemplified in American culture. Taylor contrasts this with what he calls the porous or relational view of self in pre-modern cultural traditions, which we can see exemplified in the idea of sobornost in Russian Orthodoxy. The latter differs from Western liberalism and can be hard for the latter to translate. Reviews promoting Dr. Riccardi Swartz's book include one from Professor Robert Orsi that categorizes the story of Orthodox converts as political religion in American terms. Journalist Sarah Posner states that the study transcends, quote, straightforward ethnography to describe fixation with the fascist ideologues of Eurasia, a global movement that poses a dire threat to secular democracy around the world, end quote. If this description applied to ROCOR sounds like an old Fu Manchu movie orientalizing Russian Orthodox faith, it indicates, unfortunately, how secular American academia may seek to frame the narrative of American converts in ROCOR today. Inside Orthodox intellectual circles, negative attitudes towards alleged fundamentalism and chauvinism of American converts go back at least to Father Seraphim Rose's influential writings in the 1970s. He criticized what he called crazy converts and the Zealot Party. Yet Father Seraphim's writings themselves today are often attacked as fundamentalist and overzealous by those who critique not only current day converts in ROCOR, but also in other traditional communities in North American Orthodoxy, such as at the 17 Greek monasteries founded by Elder Ephraim. Against the Russian church, charges of ethnophilatism or nationalist religion come from academics with affinities to the ecumenical patriarchate and draw on recent US political phobias of Russia, rooted in neoliberalism and neoconservative exceptionalism. But ethnophilatism, ironically, can fairly be seen in American Orthodoxy that stresses Americanness. Sometimes critics of converts, such as those on the Public Orthodoxy blog, are of ethnic Orthodox background, but well assimilated into US culture. Some also support issues such as women clergy and pastoral assimilation of LGBTQ culture, while criticizing converts paradoxically for not being traditional in opposing such American liberalism. So the academic landscape for examining the phenomenon of Orthodox converts in America remains poorly formed and politically charged. We await deeper and fairer assessments. Perhaps the epistemology of secular academics in America in this era hinders understanding stories of Orthodox conversion in an objective way. But to take a leaf from postmodernity, the lived experience of the converts needs to be taken into account more fully in an Orthodox context. From that standpoint, I can say that in our Appalachian Mission Parish and neighboring ones, there is not much interest in Russian nationalism or in a particularly positive view of the Russian government politically. There is, however, investment, for example, in traditional Christian anthropology undergirding family and the right to practice and express marriage and sexuality in a traditional Christian way, and to have the freedom for that to be taught as a legitimate life in education, media, professions, business, and public spheres apart from the new secular US ideology of pansexualism. I detect a lack of interest among our network of converts in either American neoconservatism or neoliberalism in relation to foreign interventions and systems of global economic control. But there is interest in the Christian ethos of service, in which many parishioners are involved in their work and spiritual lives, a commitment to what the American academic convert Donald Sheehan called self-emptying rather than self-assertion in building community. This is in line with Orthodox tradition voiced by the exile Saint Jonah of Hankou and Manchuria, who in the 1920s stated that podvig is to live for our neighbor. That final observation links to a hunger among many converts with, like all human beings, limitations and sins, myself the worst, to commit to the Orthodox Christian faith, not to capitalism, communism, fascism, or any other ism. This leads back to the two main questions asked at the start of this paper. Why are American converts attracted to Orthodoxy, and why may they currently end up in perhaps higher percentages in ROCOR communities than in other jurisdictions, and in a pattern of relatively tiny worship communities? And what is the role of ROCOR today? I would answer these connected questions by indicating from my experience in several American parish communities with predominantly converts, that converts are attracted to Orthodoxy in America most of all by authentic spiritual experience and by subornos or spiritual unity in the church. The fact that Russian faith survived the extreme persecution of communism, and with the prayers of all the new martyrs and of the saints of exile in the past century, such as St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco and St. Jonah of Manchuria, makes the authentic faith of Orthodoxy that much more legible in depth to converts in America today. I felt this years ago, first while reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago as a high schooler when it first came out in English, searching for a Christian faith. That was a decisive moment on my path to Orthodoxy. The old saying that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church is again in our time and place, showing forth its yield of fruit, God willing, however humbly and unworthily. This also addresses the role of ROCOR today at 100 years old. It bears witness from the martyrs of the greatest persecution of Christians in history in a recent age to a West that is lost today often in the depths of great materialism and confusion that is a new and different kind of emerging cultural totalitarianism, hostile to traditional Christianity. The Russian Orthodox exiled philosopher S.L. Frank, himself a Jewish convert to Orthodoxy, provides an underlying explanation in the title of one of his books, borrowed from Scripture, "The Light Shineth in Darkness." Thank you.
Большое спасибо. Наверное, сейчас мы должны послушать какие-то вопросы, которые есть к отцу Полу. Да, сначала у нас вопросы такие онлайн. Да, нет таких вопросов пока. Тогда, наверное, могут задать вопросы присутствующие в зале. Есть какие-то вопросы, батюшки? Да, да.
I would like to ask you one question. You have mentioned many points here, quite interesting lecture. I have a friend living in San Francisco. He's an American convert, and he became Orthodox quite a few years ago, I would say. I've asked him, how did you become Orthodox? How did you become Orthodox? And then he returned with an answer that I didn't know anything about Russia except about the Russian Tsar Nicholas. So then I decided to read about him. Then I became Orthodox. So his interest and his knowledge about His Imperial Majesty led him into some more research. That might be, I suppose, perhaps quite an exceptional case, but just because no one is because there was no questions, I decided to ask you. Perhaps you have heard of some similar cases, maybe quite rare, but just in case if you had some, if you have seen something like this, please feel free to share the experience.
In thinking about myself and groups of converts in parishes that I've been associated with and our couple of sister parishes, I would say that some people are affected by, I was having a little trouble hearing, but what I understand you said was your friend was affected or influenced by his knowledge of Tsar Nicholas and presumably the Russian Revolution and the Tsar's martyrdom, and that influenced his becoming Orthodox. And I do know of that more generally among some converts in America. And I mentioned my own experience as a teenager. I was raised as a Unitarian and also in a Christian Science church, which is, very different kind of American denomination, but essentially in a family where we didn't read the Bible and there wasn't much evidence of belief in God. But I was so struck in reading the Gulag Archipelago by the accounts, especially of people of faith, and just Solzhenitsyn's framing of that as a writer who was Christian as he was reflecting back, that really just set the seed for me towards an influence of Orthodoxy. I know of other converts who know relatively little of that, but they have researched through their own background in Protestantism, the early church, and they were interested in tracking, well, what was the history of the church? And then they get interested in Orthodoxy. And I think probably all of us as converts have been really struck by the beauty of Orthodox services. And that's something that I just was watching an interview with Jonathan Pajot, who's a North American Orthodox YouTube commentator on issues of art and Orthodoxy. And he was speaking with Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist who has a sort of interest in Orthodoxy, and also with a Catholic bishop. And it was interesting because the Catholic bishop was bemoaning that the Catholic churches had been stripped of so much of their art after Vatican II, and especially in North America, that their art and architecture had lost a lot of whatever traditional symbolism there had been. And I think that's also in the background of a lot of converts' experience, that they feel that there's been an impoverishment of beauty in their experience of Christianity in the United States. And ironically, I think some of them are also turned off by the kind of televangelists associated with the Christian evangelical right, and just the sort of approach of that type of Protestant evangelism, kind of flashy, harsh politics in the view of a number of converts to Orthodoxy too. So combination of factors, but just to get back to your question, I think that witness of the new martyrs under the communist yoke has had a significant role, but it's not the only role. It's maybe one of a number of factors, but it's an important factor, though.
Есть ли какие-то еще вопросы? Да, пожалуйста.
My question is a bit unrelated to the complete topic, but what would you say is the experience of the Jewish converts, especially in the local, the Jewish converts that immigrated from Russia during the interwar period? That would be.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't comment too much on that. I don't really know very much about it. In my academic work, I do work a fair amount with the writings of S.L. Frank, but of course he converted in Russia some years before the revolution and before he went into exile. But I'm not really too familiar with the experience of Jewish converts in ROCOR, sorry to say. This is apart from that issue, because there are all sorts of, historical issues that come into play with that. But I would say coming into ROCOR from Unitarian, non-Trinitarian faiths, which are kind of common in various degrees among educated Americans, not specifically talking about Judaism, but related to this very general sense in American culture of what is called Judeo-Christian civic religion in the old days. It's a real difference. Coming into Orthodoxy and learning about the Trinity is something, Trinity was something I never learned about. And I think there's a good percentage of Americans who are well-educated, who just have no sense of the doctrine of the Trinity, and just have a very sort of amorphous sense of deism, I guess, which runs kind of deep in American historical culture. So that doesn't relate to your question about Judaism, but I was just sort of commenting on, the jump to learning about Trinitarian Christianity is one of the leaps that a lot of Orthodox converts, even those coming from nominally Trinitarian faiths, have to take. So again, that's kind of off topic on your question. Sorry about that. But unfortunately, I don't really have much knowledge on that issue.
All right. Thank you for the